Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here on An Cluiche with me, Seamus, Brady, your host. And in this video, I'm going to run through my personal team of the year for the Hurling Championship for 2023. So this is the An Cluiche Hurling Team of the Year for 2023. So we've had one hell of a hurling year. Limerick, of course, just won the All-Ireland Hurling Championship. They're completing their 4 in a row. They did that yesterday. I just did a whole video on that about an hour ago. So if you haven't seen that, do make sure that you check that one out as well. It was basically just me recapping and reviewing the entire day's action. But now I'm going to get on to what is probably one of my favorite parts of the year when it comes to covering the GAA, selecting my personal team of the year. And it starts obviously with the hurling. Now, the football final next weekend. Then, of course, you have the LGFA and Camogie finals coming up. Teams of the year will be put up for all of them as well. So I cannot wait to do them. So I'm going to go through position by position, who impressed me, and then my final selection of all the teams. And I will be doing a recap of that at the end. So let's start with the manager. So the manager, obviously, huge role. Manager is the one who sets the standards. Manager is the one who is the first man into the dressing room, last man out. And in my opinion, the obvious one you have to start with, John Kiely. Completed the 4 in a row this year. His management team with Paul Kinnerk, the way that he has just consistently kept Limerick at the top. Like this year, they were hit with different types of challenges. They were beaten in the Munster Championship by Clare. The way that he galvanised them to come back from that and to win the Munster Championship again, and then to go on and win the All-Ireland, John Kiely is right at the top of the list. Another one, Derek Ling, first year in the Kilkenny job, Leinster champions, and got them to an All-Ireland hurling final. And in the first half, look, they were brilliant. In the first half, they were fantastic, but it just didn't pan out for them. And that's just the honest truth. It just didn't pan out for them in the second half of the final. You're looking at other managers as well, other managers that had their first year in the job, Pat Ryan with Cork, and Micheál Donoghue with Dublin. Look, there is very, very positive signs out of both of those camps. Cork, even though they did get knocked out in the Munster Championship stage, were fantastic. And their performance against Limerick in the last round, they scored 130 and lost the game. So that tells you the standard that Limerick are at. But it also shows great promise for the future for Cork. And even when they got knocked out, they seemed pretty positive, which is very rare for a big team getting knocked out of a championship like that. Micheál Donoghue at the other side with Dublin, again, first year in the job, gets us out of the Leinster Championship. I thought Dublin looked very, very good, particularly against Galway in the Leinster Championship, and the victory over Wexford. So definitely some positives there for Dublin. Year ended on a low, being beaten out the gate by Clare, of course. Good years as well from the likes of Brian Lohan, Henry Shefflin. But I will go for John Kiely as my manager of the year. It's in my opinion, it's a no-brainer. He has been magnificent. And just you're starting to look at him as, is he one of the greatest managers? He already is one of the greatest managers that we've ever had in the game. He's fantastic. Just his personality, the shot with him at the end with the cup, where he just seems like he's a great laugh as well. Like he'd be a great man to go for a pint with as well. But he has the respect of those players, and they go out there onto that pitch ready to die for their cause. And it's unbelievable that he's galvanized them to this level. So John Kiely is in. He is my manager of the year for 2023. So moving into his team, first position up, we have goalkeeper. First name I'm going to throw out is Owen Murphy. Owen Murphy, fantastic year. That save from Peter Duggan in the All-Ireland semi-final was, in my opinion, the best save I've ever seen, along with Nicky Quaid's save on Seamus Harnedy in 2018, or Anthony Nash's double save against Kilkenny, I think it was in 2013. It's the type of thing that you just couldn't fathom when you watched it in the slow motion replay, how Murphy's body is shifting to the left and how he's able to turn to the right and get enough power on his stick to flick Duggan's shot up onto the crossbar. Just an absolutely ridiculously talented goalkeeper. His puck outs are brilliant. I thought as well as that in the Dublin game, he showed a completely other side to his game as well. The fact that he was basically an outball for Kilkenny when Dublin were pushing up on them, that they could go back to Murphy and he would switch to play almost like a quarterback. So without a doubt, Owen Murphy is a shout. Nicky Quaid is another one. Again, fantastic year by Nicky in the goal for Limerick. Just, again, a real consistent player in that Limerick team ever since he got into it in the early 2010s. he's just been an awesome goalkeeper, and he's done his stuff again in 2023. Yeah, he's definitely in there with a shout as well. Puck outs, everything starts with Nicky for Limerick. Every play, his puck outs are a direct attack, and he has to be in there as well. Another one that I wanted to talk about, Eibhear Quilligan from Clare. I thought he was fantastic this year as well, because he didn't start the championship. Eamon Fowdy started in goal against Tipperary in the first game, conceded 5 goals. Clare brought Quilligan back in, and he looked a lot more solid in the nets for the Bannock County. Made an unbelievable save in the All-Ireland semi-final against Kilkenny as well. So he definitely has some awesome shot-stopping ability. But if you're to push me on it, who am I going to go for? I'm going to go for Owen Murphy from Kilkenny in goal as my goalkeeper. Now, moving into the full back line, a right corner back at the start. We're going to throw up some names here as we move into the lines of the team. We're just going to throw in all 3 of the names, and then I'm going to actually say, do you know what? Here is my full team listing at the end. So, right cornerback, I'm going with Dan Morrissey from Limerick. I think Dan Morrissey underrated this year. Underrated in terms of the fact and the way that he could just swap around positions. He was halfback, then he was wing back, then he was fullback, then he was cornerback. The reality is Dan Morrissey is just a class defender. He's just a magnificent team player. He's willing to just change around and go to whatever position you need him to go. Dan Morrissey will do that. And I think he's absolutely brilliant in his position. So I'm going Dan Morrissey at right cornerback. I think he'd be just as good in any position in that defense. But for me, he has to be in there, given all that he did this year for the treaty. Fullback, then, I'm going with Hugh Lawler from Kilkenny. I think this guy is the full package when it comes to fullbacks. I think he's the full package when it comes to defenders. He is huge. He's a big lad, but he's really, really mobile, and he's strong, and he's determined, and he sticks with you. Did a good job on Aaron Gillane. And I know that is mad when you consider Gillane scored 5 points in the final, but Lawler was good. And Gillane is that good that if you keep him to 5, 3 frees, that's a pretty good day at the office. And Lawler is one of the best fullbacks in the country, in my opinion, if not the outright best. And I am putting him as my fullback in my hurling team of the year for this year. Filling out that line, I'm going with Barry Nash from Limerick, a guy who has just changed the position. He's become a direct threat to the opposing team from cornerback. That's how good Barry Nash is. Teams have to plan for him, and he's had a difficult year. When you look at it, that one of the goals for teams this year, every team that was coming up against Limerick, one of their goals was to stop Barry Nash. You have the Waterford game where Waterford really went for him in that game. Then every team kind of took the leaf out of that book, all kind of implied the same methods to try and get at Barry Nash. So I think he's had a fantastic year, especially when you look at how more attention was drawn onto him than had been in years previous. I think good shouts in this line. Rory Hayes for me from Clare was really, really good. Dahi Burke, I know he'd been out in the halfback line as well, but I think he deserves a shout as well for that position. I thought he was really, really good at stage this year as well. Mikey Butler is the obvious shout as well. I think he just about misses out for me. I think he scored a fantastic goal against Galway in the Leinster final. Again, very solid in the All-Ireland semi-final on Tony Kelly. I'm just going to go with the 3 that I've gone with, though. I'm going to go with Dan Morrissey, Hugh Lawler, and Barry Nash. Moving then into the half-back line. Right half-back for me, easiest one in the team, Diarmaid Byrnes. What a hurler this guy is. Just an absolutely awesome hurler. He is fantastic. And it's like, you look at one of his scores in the All-Ireland final. It was in the 53rd minute, I believe, or the 43rd minute. 53rd, sorry. It was the 53rd. He boomed it over from inside his own, well inside his own half. And it was one of those where it's kind of laughable how good he is. He pinged it over from such a crazy distance out. And him and Tom Morrissey, in particular in the Tipperary game for Limerick, were the ones driving it forward. They were the ones that were just literally over my dead body are we losing this game. And they were dragging everything they could out of not just themselves, but the teammates around them. Byrnes, in my opinion, he's starting to look like he's one of the greatest halfbacks ever. Yeah, like he genuinely is. Obviously, you have the Tommy Walshes, the Sean O'Halpines, the Brian Wheelhans. In my opinion, Diarmaid Byrnes belongs in that company now. Not only is he a towering defender, an absolute rocket right half back, but he's a guarantee for scores every single game. Every game that Dermot Burns plays, he's a guarantee for 3 or 4 points. And any free that a team gives away to Limerick, even if it's inside Limerick's half, Dermot Burns will slot it over. So he's in there, absolutely no question about it. Now, centre half back was a difficult one because obviously you had the Declan Hannon injury for Limerick, so he's not there. John Conlon or William O'Donoghue. Those are the two that I was really looking at and thinking, who do I go with here? But I am going with John Conlon. Just about, because I think the key game when you want to look at, when you want to look at just how good John Conlon is the Kilkenny semi-final. Because last year John Conlon was missing for that semi-final, and it was recommended to me by a lot of Clare people that Conlon's absence was a huge factor in how bad Clare were that day and how important he is to them. When he came back in, he looked fantastic, and he had a great game in that semi-final against Kilkenny, and he's had a fantastic year. Again, for Clare, he's been brilliant. I hope he doesn't retire. I know he's hitting now the early 30s. I hope he doesn't retire. I hope he has another year in him. I hope he wins a Munster medal, because him and Tony Kelly, Shane O'Donnell, they absolutely deserve a Munster medal. But Limerick are so damn good, it's going to be hard to do it. But yeah, I think he's a worthy shout in there. William O'Donoghue deserves a hell of a lot of credit as well, though. When you look at how he just changed his game, went back to centre half back. You want me to do that in an All-Ireland semi-final? Cool, no problem. You like crazy that Limerick are that good that they can switch around position to position, because I actually didn't see that coming. I thought that they would go with, for example, Dan Morrissey out to wing back, Mike Casey fullback, Richie English in the corner, and Kyle Hayes centre half back. And speaking of Kyle Hayes, he's on the left. Kyle Hayes, for me, he's been touted as hurler of the year material by Our Game, for example. And yeah, I can definitely see why. Like, he's had an awesome year, particularly in the semi-final against Galway. I thought he was just majestic in the half-back line, and he's just an absolute Rolls Royce of a player, that he's just awesome. He's so good. He's so big. He's so fast, and he's so skillful. And I think he is an absolute prototype for a half-back. He is everything that you need a defender to have, everything that you need a hurler to have. So he goes in there at left half back from me. The other big shout out that I have to give is Diarmuid Ryan from Clare. I think in certain games this year, Diarmuid Ryan has been fantastic, particularly in the Munster Championship, in games like the Cork game, the Clare versus Limerick game. Sorry. I think he was brilliant in those games, and he was a real leader for Clare at stages throughout the championship. So I will give him a shout out as well. I think he's more than deserving of being nominated for an All-Star this year, but he just about misses out on my team personally. Now, moving into the midfield pairing, this one was really, really difficult, because in my opinion, there was 3 obvious choices to look at here. 2 from Limerick, 1 from Clare. Darragh O'Donovan, William O'Donoghue, and David Fitzgerald. The guy I decided to leave out, and I cannot believe I'm saying this, because I do genuinely believe he is fantastic. It's really, really difficult to say who deserves out of these 3 to miss out. The first one in for me is Darragh O'Donovan from Limerick. I think he was magnificent this season, carried his standards up and up and up, and he's the one who put Limerick in front against Kilkenny in the All-Ireland final, when Limerick were in the middle of their turnover of Kilkenny's original 6-point lead when Limerick eventually took over the game. So for me, Darragh O'Donovan in there. Then it's a choice between David Fitzgerald or William O'Donoghue, and it's so difficult to choose, because from a personal standpoint, David Fitzgerald ripped Dublin. I know that in the All-Ireland quarter-final. His runs straight through the heart of Dublin's team were so effective. And in every game that Fitz has played in, he's been slamming the balls over from midfield. He got the All-Star last year. For me, William O'Donoghue is just, as I've said in numerous podcast episodes, he's the Roy Keane of this team. He is the absolute beating heart of that Limerick midfield. And I think if you take him out, Limerick lose a lot more of their games. It's so hard to call between these two, because you don't want the team to be all Limerick as well, because other teams have been brilliant this year. William O'Donoghue for me, though, is just too good and too important to Limerick to leave out. So I will just shade it to William O'Donoghue. I think David Fitzgerald is just as equally a good shout. I think he is absolutely just as worthy, but just given how important William O'Donoghue is and how much he changed his game and how much he adapted to Limerick to go to centre half back, and even when he was in midfield, he was brilliant. I'm just going to shade it to him. Moving into the half forward line then. First man up at right half forward that we're going to look at is Shane O'Donnell from Clare, and he goes straight in for me. Absolutely fantastic year. And the moment of the year from Shane O'Donnell was no doubt that goal against Kilkenny in the All-Ireland semi-final. What a finish to the roof of the Kilkenny net. Past Owen Murphy, no less. So absolutely, Shane O'Donnell for me, no question. He's in there at right half forward. Centre half forward then in this team, I'm going to go for TJ Reid from Kilkenny. Of course, this year broke the all-time championship top scorer record of Patrick Horgan. Horgan will be back next year to try and take that mantle back, no doubt about it. But TJ Reid is one of the greatest hurlers of all time and had another fantastic year this year for the Cats, leading from the front and just a magnificent ambassador for the game. He goes in for me at centre half forward. Cian Lynch deserves a shout for his performance in the final, but in the entire year, not quite for me. He did obviously get dropped. He got taken off. But I think in the final, he was fantastic in that All-Ireland final. So he does deserve to be mentioned. Gearóid Hegarty this year has been nailed on in previous years, but his form was off this year. And that's why the form of the last man in this half-forward line was crucial. Tom Morrissey from Limerick. His form was absolutely vital to Limerick at a time when other troops around him were dropping their form. Tom Morrissey was carrying the can, particularly in the game against Tipperary. Tom Morrissey led from the front, and his shot actually put Limerick in front in the dying minutes of that game before John McGrath got the free to equalise it. So it's a fantastic achievement for Morrissey that, he's in this team. But on top of that, that when Lynch dropped his form, when Hegarty dropped his form, when other players around him dropped their level, Morrissey kept his up. And he became the guy who was doing the business for Limerick at a time when their level was dropping. And he kept them at the top table. So, yeah, Tom Morrissey goes in for me there at left half forward. I think other shouts, Tony Kelly. Again, very good year for Tony Kelly, and he absolutely ripped through Dublin in the All-Ireland quarterfinal, but wasn't at his absolute best this year. So I think just about doesn't get in for me this year, unfortunately, for Tony. Other players who had great years, I think you're looking at the likes of Noel McGrath. I thought he was very solid for Tipperary as well in the championship. Dara Fitzgibbon for Cork had a really, really good year. Then, if you're trying to look at it from a Galway perspective, I thought Evan Nyland, Joseph Cooney, that I haven't mentioned yet. Both of them were solid. Nyland, particularly from Freeze. Kevin Cooney, another one that had big moments in him as well. So definitely good moments. Donald Burke as well from Dublin. I thought fantastic year from him, particularly in the Galway game. I thought he was magnificent. But yeah, that's the half forward line. I've gone with Shane O'Donnell at right half forward, TJ Reid in the middle, and Tom Morrissey at left half forward, which brings us then to our full forward line. And in my opinion, without any disrespect to anybody else in the country, to any other player in the country, this was, in my opinion, the easiest line of the team to pick. Owen Cody from Kilkenny, Conor Whelan from Galway, and Aaron Gillan from Limerick. All three of these, in my opinion, this year were the best forwards in Ireland, these three. Owen Cody, start with him. A goal in the All-Ireland final after 9 minutes. Just his ability this year, he's taken it to a whole nother level. And in my opinion, just fantastic because he's just so damn good. That goal that he got, the way he picked it up, spotted the gap, darted through it, and hammered it into the bottom corner past Nicky Quaid. To do that on the biggest stage of all, he is a magnificent hurler. And his form throughout this season was awesome. So he goes straight in there, right corner forward for me. Full forward then Conor Whelan, the one-trick pony. How that quote has come back to bite Jackie Tyrrell. But what a year Conor Whelan had. 2-7 and then 2-6 in back-to-back games. Man of the match against Kilkenny in the Leinster final. Man of the match against Tipperary in the All-Ireland quarter-final. Just a fantastic hurler. And in every game that Galway played this season, he led from the front. And he's really now picked up the mantle from Joe Canning. It is genuinely, a fantastic, fantastic hurler. He goes straight in there for me at full forward in this all-star team. And then in the top of the left, Aaron Gillane at left corner forward. I'm captaining him because he is my personal hurler of the year. He has been unplayable this season. 1-11 in the Munster final against Clare, and he has been at the best form that I have seen him at ever. So he was just ridiculous this year. And at the start of the season, when people were talking about him potentially not coming back, it was scary because he is that good. And I said it on the podcast, that's a potentially All-Ireland changing decision, whether or not he comes back. And I meant that at the time. I was genuinely saying he is that good. And when he came back in, he brought Limerick's goal threat back, and he's a guaranteed 5 points a game. He is an awesome forward, and he goes straight in there, top of the left from me. I'm captaining him because I'm just going to shade him as my hurler of the year. Other options for hurler of the year for me, Kyle Hayes. As I said, he was given the award by other people. He's been fantastic as well. He definitely is a good shout for hurler of the year. Dermot Burns for me then would be my third option, along with Conor Whelan. I think from Galway is another shout for hurler of the year. You could argue on Cody as well, but for me, it has to be Gillane. He has been fantastic. 10 out of 10 this season from him. Now we have here as well from Meadman, we have opinions on Buff. I'm guessing that's Buff Egan. On Buff Egan saying Tony Kelly is a better athlete than David Clifford. He's definitely a better hurler, but I don't agree with Tony being a better athlete than David Clifford. I mean, Clifford has really bulked up since he started getting onto the senior setup. I mean, there's that infamous photo of Clifford taking a shot where his leg is up at his head. His flexibility, his movement, he's so tall, powerful, fast. Don't get me wrong, Tony Kelly is a class athlete as well. But I think if I had to say which of them is the better athlete, look, they'd have to go up against each other in a contest, but I would say the Clifford for me is probably the better athlete of the two. But yeah, for anybody watching who hasn't been there since the start, I'm going to give my recap of my all-star team for 2023. So let's go. The An Cluiche Hurling Team of the Year 2023 by me, Seamus Brady. Here it is. In goal, I've gone with Owen Murphy from Kilkenny. That save in the All-Ireland semi-final against Clare. Enough said. Full back line, I've gone for Dan Morrissey from Limerick, Hugh Lawler from Kilkenny, and Barry Nash from Limerick. The half-back line, I've gone for Dermot Burns from Limerick, John Conlon from Clare, and Kyle Hayes from Limerick. Midfield, I've gone with Darragh O'Donovan and William O'Donoghue, both from Limerick. Half-forward line, I've gone with Shane O'Donnell from Clare, TJ Reid from Kilkenny, and Tom Morrissey from Limerick. And full-forward line, I've gone with Owen Cody from Kilkenny, Conor Whelan from Galway, and Aaron Gillane from Limerick. Manager of the year, I've gone with John Kiley from Limerick. And hurler of the year, I've gone with Aaron Gillane from Limerick. Tough misses out, obviously. You're looking at the likes of Dermot Ryan, David Fitzgerald, Mikey Butler that I've left out, Nicky Quaid, that are really, really good shouts. But this is my personal team. Let me know what you think of it. Put it in the comments below whether you agree or disagree with me and what changes you would make. Guys, that is my hurling team of the year for 2023. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of An Cluiche. And until the next one, guys, take care.